63. The American 63. Do you know what that is? George Meany. You know George Meany died right before his 64th year of service? Did you know that? It cut him up right before he got to completion, man. And what was he trying to get completed? Anybody know what George Meany was working on? He was working on a healthcare plan. We're talking about a man that had more than 60 years involved with organized labor. How many times did he have to go before Congress? Accused of what? Right? You know, a while ago I found a transcript of a deposition that former Attorney General Robert Kennedy did before he became Attorney General. You know, he had quite a professional life before he became Attorney General, which, by the way, was questioned. You know that after the Kennedy era, there was an executive preclusion put on hiring members of your family for cabinet posts. You weren't supposed to be allowed to hire actual members of your family to serve in your cabinet. Does that include any position in your administration? I mean, nobody's tried to challenge that. With all the brouhaha about unprofessionalism or whatever, nobody's called out the fact that the president appointed his daughter and son-in-law as some form of special White House advisor, meaning they would be entitled to benefits as part of the Office of Personnel and Management's consideration of White House staff that would be put up for benefits, like pension benefits, right? Like whatever the insurance benefits are that come with being on the staff at the White House, right? See, those are the kinds of things George Meany dealt with. And he dealt with them on a very significant level, including an international level, which, don't worry, we're going to get back to what I was talking about with Robert Kennedy. But see, George Meany did this thing. There was this major organization, International Labor Organization, and George Meany was a part of it, and they were about to have a big summit, and he contacted them. And he said, guys, you know what? I've been reviewing these financial records, and we got a problem. And then he proceeded to lay out the problem. This was a year before something very major happened in the world of organized labor that spoke directly to former Attorney General Robert Kennedy. See, in this transcript I read, he was questioning a man, an African American man, who had been assigned to do special favors for a judge in Tennessee. This judge had been identified as a suspect in what was an investigation of judicial racketeering. The allegations were that there were judges, including state judges, but also federal district judges, that were engaged in racketeering and abusing their position as a judge in order to set up kickbacks, including kickbacks involved with highly illegal activities. And part of what Robert Kennedy did when he was an attorney, is he worked on this. See, he had a very specific role. It was very important to him and to his brother, by the way, who was also, in Congress and became president. It was very important that they address communism with an understanding that they had come from a particular kind of experience in the United States. And when the House Un-American Activities Committee got started under J. Edgar Hoover, and then when Joseph McCarthy took the lead on his commission, there was a significant focus on communism. One of the major things that they were concerned with was the abuse of the public education system in order to attempt to recruit young people into communist activity. Now, you could say what you want, the role of a teacher being very important, instilling critical thinking as a form of citizenship and awareness for conscientious civic engagement, including the spirit of dissent that also accommodated the understanding that many of the early founders of the United States were considered terrorists by the King and the Queen of England, right? The British Crown considered a lot of who we would consider to be our forefathers and American heroes to actually be terrorists. So, all of these things are part of our history, and how we absorb our history, how we share it's very important. But it's also important to know that part of Robert Kennedy's service was to participate in what was anticipated and hoped to be a transition in the focus of the House Un American Activities Committee away from targeting people for political dissent that emotionalism could allow to focus specifically and exclusively on allegations of communism, regardless of whether or not there was an actual cogent or cognizable understanding of actual affiliation, either with Moscow or with a communist organization seeking a violent overthrow of the United States government, but rather to focus on acts of racketeering and the infiltration by organized crime, a variety of different kinds of organized crime, into the labor movement and into other movements of civil and political organizing that would then allow for the emergence of the same things that were alleged to be at the core of the communist conspiracy. It's important to understand it in that manner because something very significant was going on with workers' rights around this time as well. I found it in an article that around the time they were talking about these rackets, the union rackets, the judicial rackets, there was a request from workers in Moscow. There was a workers' organization in Moscow that made a formal request to members of the organized labor movement in the United States to cease and desist in working on any new or any efforts at proliferation of nuclear weapons. And it was soundly and resoundingly repudiated by members of the alleged organized labor movement. I just want to put that into context here. It's not static, but it is about understanding how we understand ourselves and our history.